My name is Karenza Harris, and in 2018, I was invited to run a workshop at the DEVLAB 2018 XR workshop, which was run by RYOT, Oculus, and Kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope is now Artizen. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it, narrate this video that I just uploaded. I have a version that doesn't have any commentary if anyone wants to look at it without me talking in the background. Um, I had met Renee Pinnell, who's the founder of Kaleidoscope, which is now Artisan, a few months before, and then we ended up collaborating on a couple of projects afterward. And the event was conceptualized as an incubator for uh, you know, bringing diverse content creators that were getting into XR and immersive technology. 2018, I think, was a big year for that, where there was a real push. Everybody was kind of exploring the realm of immersives, and the headsets were becoming good enough to and the apps and everything. I mean, the hardware and software were just becoming good enough to leverage that into concrete experiences at the time. And so there was a group of independent creators that went from, filmmakers, gamers, storytellers, musicians were there as well, and animators as well. And everybody was getting together in this particular event to look at some of the work that was produced and talk a little bit about what's going on, how can we improve, what are the tricks of the trade, and how people are navigating this emerging, uh, let's just say, media, experiential media, especially as an independent creator. I was there a little bit of the odd person, in the group, because I was coming from the realm of architecture, which is generally not involved at the time anyway, involved in those types of groups. And it was really interesting because I had a certain set of experiences that were very different from what everybody else's experience was, but we were able to meet and find really real connections between how an architect might envision built environment and the set of skills that it requires to create those environments, and kind of look at these content creators and how their point of view is affecting maybe my workflow as well. So the workshop that I put together demonstrated, kind of how architecture naturally embodies, for sure, the essential elements that you find that you find in immersive experiences. And really, architects inherently craft spatial narrative. It's essential for the kind of architectural composition to work. And we are also crafting experiential journeys through these composition, and we're engaging all the senses, you know in real world environment, right? And it's a very interesting kind of transition, because we start in conceptual phase and design phase with the tools at hand, which are, pen and paper, digital modeling, physical modeling, prototyping, narrative, scripting of the space, choreographing movements, and all of that comes into play in real world environment. So there's like a real test of these assumptions and strategies that comes into play once the building is put out into the world, or that one iteration of the building is put out into the world. We so then this kind of translation of our abstract concepts with the tangible built form that ends up at the end is really where the interesting things are happening, and where the conversation may occur. And again, we are, dealing with kind of spatial relationships. We're dealing with curating sensory rich narratives that will connect the human body to a built or natural environment. So I think the key the key factors here, the kind of three major elements are the human body, the built environment, and the natural environment. Anyway, so during that workshop, I met with the different group, and I showed them a collection of Morphosis architects' work, from who with who I'm working, and we kind of walk through some ideas for each of these segments. So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to narrate that video that again is old, right? It's almost 10 years old, and but I think it's interesting to go backward and look at that approach that we had in 2018 and how we kind of started to develop our own sensibility related to the architecture and these emerging so let me play it. So I'm going to play literally from my computer. So you're going to see the bar here and there. I may stop it if I need to explain, something a little bit more. Now, Morphosis Architect was founded by Tom Main, that you can see here, in 1973. And it's been pretty prolific in a variety of building types. And there is definitely an overarching philosophy about what architects do, what kind of architecture do we want to put out into the world, and how we propose to do that, right? And so there's definitely a strong sense of who we are and where we're going. And again, opening up to also the unknown is another thing here. Now, as I've talked about a little bit in the introduction, we do translate concepts into built forms, and the concepts are driven not only by materiality potentially and space, but they're definitely weaved through a narrative or an overall story that allows us to kind of uh, put it all together, right? So the tools that we are using are the way to get there, and the elements of the trade, which are materials, light, spaces and forms, all of that are some of the elements that we're using in the language, and then their relationship to each other are this vocabulary that we are identifying. So here we're looking again at the natural environment, the built environment, and the human body, and how these three elements are coming with sets of particular element, right? So the human body will come in with all its senses, the materiality, the textures, the colors, the surface. Surface component, noise, and all these things are built elements. And then you have the natural elements. We bring us the same type of vocabulary but with a completely different meaning: the meaning of texture, the meaning of light, the meaning of um, I don't know, transparency. All these things are starting to come in together. They're connected by time, for sure. And we are now, as the architect, the conductor who is choreographing, putting all the pieces together and organizing them as the kind of the environment may change, the built environment and the natural environment. We are continuing to kind of set the story together and set the different factors together, and their relationship is probably the most important thing, right? So the human perception is never talked about as human perception in architecture necessarily. At least we don't do that. We'll talk more about how can the narrative that we're driving through these architectural composition can begin to be translated into these experiences. The Emerson College, it's located on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. And this is an example, again, of using kind of tangible textures and materials to create this wall that resounds, that kind of resolves two different conditions: an exterior condition, which is an exterior elements, for example, tree and bridge, that are starting to affect the the mesh or the surface. And then behind that, you have a completely different experience, which is more about spatial and light and movement, and this idea of like dark and shadows. And the experience on one side is very different than the experience on the other side. But that relax and reflection, for example, those two words are driven by our narrative. And the outside, which is the attractor point, is also driven by the narrative. But then what's in between is that resolution, the architectural resolution. This is the Cologne one and only towers in Seoul. It was also completed around 2018. And here, again, in order for us to try to understand, because as the architecture becomes a little bit more complex, we are developing all these strategies to try to understand what we're making so that we can adjust and articulate it in a most optimized way. And so we use digital modeling, one-to-one prototypes and physical models so that we can bring that additional set of discoveries or learning that we do during the process of creation that allows us to understand an idea of scale, an idea of reflection, an idea of texture, an idea of color, and how once we put all these layers together on the facade and in the spaces, we're starting to read something maybe different, right? So a texture of these white bulbous thing over a translucent or transparent window, over a walkable space, over this atrium liner that's made of light and forms and shapes. All of these layers together now gives you an overly complex element that it may be understood in a slightly different way, right? So here again, the idea of materiality, reflection, sound reflection, especially in these spaces where we are here wrapping stone on from the ground to the walls to the ceiling, right? We're creating these experience through the manipulation of space and material. Here, the nested egg is basically a stair. That's all it is. But the stair itself is nested inside the egg, and it has an oculus at the top. And so throughout the day, the light moves along the surface of the stair. And then below, it's hovering above a little bit of water, right? And so this kind of reflection and shimmering of water now starts to create a variety of interaction between potentially the body, the human that is walking in, and how it's perceiving all these sometimes subtle, sometimes more dynamic elements. Now, the way we shape and mold the architecture, I'm going to explain that in a different video here that's going to be called 01 system. We're going to have three of them. But this idea of manipulating space starts at the beginning with this manipulation of form. And then as we move forward, these amorphous or morphed forms that are becoming something as we move towards the resolution of the architecture or the end of the design become more material, more tangible, more physical, right? This is the Perot Museum of Science and Nature and Science. Sorry, I mixed it up. And let me go a little bit back, right? I want to kind of talk a little bit about this initial element. So this museum is located in Dallas, and it was built, I think we finished it in 2012, so it's even older. But again, we didn't have XR, we didn't have VR, we didn't have any immersives, we didn't have Unreal. Unity was already there, but I think for this particular building, it's very much based on our experience and also our relationship with the program and the client, right? And weaving again a narrative through this. Now, there are building types that are a little bit freer in terms of uh, establishing a certain narrative. And I think museums are that, even though they have to host or contain artwork. And so there's a balance between how strong the architecture interferes with the kind of viewing or the experience of the artwork versus maybe in more public spaces where the artwork is not yet seen. So it would be the entry, the lobby, the atrium, all these other types of space where we can kind of dial up the architecture, dial up the kind of interactive and dynamic relationship between the viewer, the person experiencing the space. And that's where we find the moments of play. Now, there is for sure a way to visualize these things differently. Let me show you a couple of images before we go here. So here, so this is an image of the building or the composition, the architectural composition. I like to call it a little bit like that because building makes it very physically limited. But when I talk about architectural composition, I'm talking about anything and everything that's on site. We consider the viewer, the visitor, let's just call it a visitor, a part of the story the moment they stepped on the site. Now they come in with their prior experiences, their bias for certain, their beliefs, their life experiences. As I said before, sorry, I'm repeating myself. They come in with already a persona, right? That's either well defined or if it's a child or something, they have different perception or a way of experiencing a space. So we're dealing with that existing condition, and what we're trying to do is change or affect or enhance or um, provide a rich experience for anyone. So an experience that is both group, community, human, and an experience that is also unique, right? So we're playing on both front, but we're also playing with a fully formed human that has their own set of experience. So we pick them up at the beginning when they step onto the site, and that's where the narrative starts. The approach of the building, the sequence of space in which they're going through to get into the building or the architecture, and how they are circulating through, experiencing sometimes in your face, sometimes very obvious kind of architectural play, and sometimes more subtle, right? We like to choreograph, but without necessarily pushing someone or making it being aware of what's going on. We like to also nudge, or kind of and enhance an experience or inform something so that by the time you come out of the site, you leave the experience, you have been changed somehow, right? And I think that's part of what we're trying to do. But again, it's never uh, well, I wouldn't say never, but it more often it's kind of a subtle shift, movement, uh, change in texture, sound, light, things like that that may start to shape the experience via that story that we've established throughout. Now, what I wanted to show you here is a picture of this building in the sun, in probably in the summer. There's a relationship again, nature to built form. There's a relationship of solid to voids. There's a relationship of mass. There's shadows and light and reflection. So everything is kind of playing here in a quite bright way. And then let me show you the equivalent here of the same composition, architectural composition in the winter when it's just kind of drizzled and rain on the concrete of the facade. And you can see very similar views out of a very different landscape, right? And when I'm saying landscape, I'm not just talking about the vegetation, but I'm talking about the overall composition, right? And so I think that with a very kind of set um, collection of elements, of architectural elements, and how they're combined together, you can have very, very different experiences over time. And it's very difficult to put these narratives together when there are so many components or factors that may come into play to influence it, right? But I think it's part of what we are learning as we go through our professional life and based on our expertise, we're starting to be able to anticipate and manipulate things in a certain way so that we may give two very different types of experience. Now, the picture on the left obviously would be uh, giving most people not a very positive set of senses. It may smell good. That might be like one of the great things here. But there is definitely we are okay with the sentiment being positive or negative. We're playing on that line as well. Okay, so let's go back to this guy here. So again, as I said, there is different ways of seeing it. There's definitely a path towards the mass of the building. You enter the building from below. So then above you, you have this kind of curvy, dark ceiling that is kind of, you've already seen the cube above, right? So you've already seen the cube that's kind of hovering or floating above you, and it's at its base, it's surrounding by light coming from all these large windows, or so it opens back to the landscape with the light coming in. But because you've already experienced the approach in a very specific way, you now understand that the slit at the bottom that you've entered, and let me show it to you again, it's right here, is below millions of pounds of concrete, right? This very heavy element. And then as you move underneath it, you're going to see a series of opening in front of you. Some of the opening go to the atrium that goes all the way up to the roof. And then some of them go to the first set of escalators that you have to go through to get in to start your journey through the cube, right? The way you navigate the museum is that you'll move up all the way to the top, and then you'll visit each gallery as you move down. Now, the journey through the cube starts with this elevator, which now, starting from this kind of weighted, heavy ceiling with all this bright light coming into, now we're kind of tightening, we're depriving you of a view, and the sound is also muted, and we're giving you a point of light at the end, right? So now we're kind of um, changing the way you may experience that. And then at the end of the elevator, it releases you back to these large window opening back to the city. And as you can see, the freeway that is right beside it. The atrium is a very articulated space that starts at the bottom and goes all the way to the top. The camera is placed in a way that you can kind of see the forced perspective between all these bridges that are crisscrossing. And all the surfaces are highly reflective, which means that there's a lot of echoes in the space, and you may not always, hold on, let me go back again so we can see it right here. So there's a forced perspective because of the bridges. As you travel along the different levels, you may not be able to see other people, but you will certainly hear them, right? So this space, again, has been activated through light, circulation, sound, echoes, really, because we're now kind of creating a fuzzy sort of interaction with sounds from above and below. And then we're also playing with light, right? So as you going back into the exhibit space, the cube space, you will be back into a more toned down, darker, quieter space, right? Because at that point, the architecture takes a back step to the exhibit, and that's done on purpose. But then this is almost like the palette cleanser when you're going back to this highly activated space for again, this choreographed potentially because you are following a path, but it doesn't force, right? There are always options to get off the path and take another, go another direction. So that's a really interesting space, and an architectural composition that really is informed in terms of how to express this narrative. Now, here, this is the Giant Interactive Group Corporation. It's their headquarters, and it's in China. And you can see here more at the global kind of massing, where we're starting again to play with these kind of the tensions that we're establishing between, let's just say, a large cantilever of a space, and it has a window at the end. So as you are in these spaces, you may be able to see, out the window. Here is an office kind of meeting room that has a glass floor in this particular case, where you can start to see what's going on in between, below. And here is a pathway that moves from places, from different, places or different spaces. And you can, some of you, some people may already know that there is here now a blurred boundary between the inside and the outside, between the nature context and the built form context. And we are starting to kind of blurring the boundary, but also changing the relationship by lifting the landscape, by moving in, moving out. And then sometimes there are bounded isolations, right? That are directional and that do not give you a choice of where to go. There's like a very straightforward path that is isolated and that allows you to exit through the points of light, for example. So there's a deliberate choice of textures, again, material, light, and the way that the ceilings are articulated. You see the ceiling is a little bit sloped. This is another area in the same building. Let me go back to it so we can kind of look at it a little bit more in depth here. Okay, right here. So this is stadium seating. Behind us is, or on the left is a series of, I think, basketball court or something, kind of activity. So people are actually looking at sport. But imagine what this is doing here now. Again, we have a very dark ceiling that is not flat, so it's moving a little bit, and we have a, a floor or a ground condition, which is that nature condition that is also not flat. And they're not meeting completely. They're kind of hovering slightly away from each other, which creates a real tension and a real sense of either openness as we look out towards the left, or really look out towards the play areas, or the space might be experienced in a different way. We may, some visitors may start to feel the weightiness of the spaces behind them. And again, that building is really, really interesting. It does play with this inside outside, nature nurture, building, spatial connection, and kind of weaving that story between, each of the spaces and also globally. And I showed this animation at the end because we wanted to talk about the scale, right? Because things happen at the scale of things that we can hold in our hands. Let me stop it. And it also can be at the kind of city level, at the urban level, at the larger perceived elements, maybe. And so I think we are definitely translating all of these strategy via a variety of scales and a variety of building types or experiences types that we are kind of, choreographing and composing in very specific ways. So that was part of the conversation. It was a very short kind of introduction to what we're doing, and hopefully it's helpful for people to start understanding. Now, I'm talking in a very kind of basic level right now. It's not going into specific detail of the actual strategies that we're using and how we're doing that, but it starts to maybe inform the types of controls that we may have using the environment, built or natural, to start influencing or nudging a certain type of reaction or emotional connection towards something that we've put together. Thank you.